Hi guys, so we're going to look at rotator cuff this month. So last month we did lower back pain. This month we're going to look more at the rotator cuff and what the function of it really is. So the first thing, the function of the rotator cuff is really to hold the humerus into the shoulder, okay, into the glendoid fossa and the glenohumeral joint here, okay. There's a couple of different functions within the muscles that are around it, based on the infraspinatus, the supraspinatus, and teres. Really what we're going to look at is take a more global view than just going, we can do lots of rotator cuff movements here. We're actually going to look at what can cause shoulder pain in terms of exercise to start with. So there's a couple of things that really we see quite a lot with this. The first thing is going to be poor shoulder blade movement. So someone in a push-up or a bench press just driving through their shoulders all the time here and gripping here instead of actually moving through the shoulder blades. So suddenly the rotator cuff becomes stressed. They can get impingement in infraspinatus at the back side of the shoulder up into here. So that's the first thing, is if you've got poor shoulder blade mechanics or poor shoulder blade movement, too much stress on the rotator cuff can just irritate it and annoy it. The second thing we're looking at is people who are just highly stressed and shrug all the time. Again, they can't move their shoulders freely in this position. Yeah, it's really grippy on the outside here, and that's just because highly stressed, or there's some form of response that they don't know how to move correctly, or there's a fear of movement, so their upper traps are engaged all the time. And that's really the second thing. The third thing we're looking at is generally just people don't know how to move their shoulders. Yeah, and we see it all the time that people haven't been coached and haven't been trained and don't understand what movements the shoulders actually need to go through for good shoulder health. Particularly people who are playing golf, particularly people who throw, they struggle with these movements if they haven't been trained in how to do them and done the necessary strength and conditioning work to facilitate that and to keep them strong. I mean, if you look at someone who is some form of thrower, so playing American football or something like that, the back side of that shoulder needs to be really strong, because they could get labral tears in the back of the shoulder, and then that's game changing, that's career changing for them, and often needs surgery and a long rehab process. So really looking at shoulder health and rotator cuff health. The synopsis of what we're going to do will give you the insight and information in order just to add certain little elements into your training programs. So the first thing we're going to look at is what movements should the shoulder be able to go through. Well, we've got very simple things like shoulder flexion, okay? We've got extension. Then we have horizontal extension, horizontal flexion, adduction, and abduction, okay? So there's a lot of different movements that the shoulder should be able to go through. Really what we're going to break these down into is rotational movements. So looking at what the shoulder does in function in terms of rotation. So if we take someone who's bench pressing and they're gripping like mad, often it's poor shoulder blade position, and then something to do with the fact they've got poor shoulder mechanics or poor shoulder movement. So the first thing we want to do is, if we look at the shoulder itself in isolation, we're just going to have a look at, can that person internally or externally rotate their shoulder? Now, we could use a wall to test this if you're at home. So we could very simply just take a wall, stand next to it. The dado rail doesn't really help here, but that's the joys of the studio. And just set yourself up here and just see if you can rotate round so that my arm is at around about 90 degrees to the shoulder. Okay, and then back onto there. Now my external is not too bad, but my internal isn't the best, and I kind of break around here and drive quite far forward. So that's something I could probably work on. And I can compare that to my opposing side here. There, and that left side's a lot stiffer, okay? So from there I could look and say, well, it could be my ribcage position. Yeah, and this shoulder blade position. So I can just draw this down and feel that left oblique engage, and that gets a lot easier externally. and a hell of a lot easier internally and isn't biting into my neck, which is good news. Okay, so if those movements are poor, you could just keep doing that to try and fix them. One of the things I like to do is actually get the shoulder blade in more of a neutral position where it's spread apart from the spine first in order to fix it. Now, you can do that using a bed or an incline bench for this. And that's where I would get up onto the treatment table or the couch here or your bed and basically put a block or a half roller underneath the arm and the shoulder. From there, I just create a gentle fist, so I'm not gripping, but I just feel some tension, and I rotate back. And what I'm really trying to feel is the back side of the shoulder, all in here, fire up, okay? And be aware of those muscles stabilizing. There. If I'm going the opposing way, I set the same position and just rotate forward into it. And I'm trying to feel the front side of the shoulder up. So I'm trying to feel into the anterior delt fire up. And that's just a couple of quick assessments and fixes to try and improve shoulder health and shoulder mechanics, first of all.